Hi, I'm David Miller, one of the co-hosts today for Web Bytes, and today's topic is educational measurement and post-secondary research. I'm from the University of Florida, where I'm the professor in research and evaluation methods, and also the director of the School of Human Development and Educational Resources in Education.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Tammie Cumming. I'm the Associate Provost for Institutional Effectiveness and Assistant Vice President at Brooklyn College of the City University of New York. And today I'd like to welcome Dr. Russell Cannon from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We're so excited to have you here with us today, Russ. I thought maybe we'd start out by having you talk a little bit about your work at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Sure thing. Yeah, thank you, Tammie and David. It's wonderful to be with you today. As you mentioned, I'm a senior program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm on our measurement, learning, and evaluation team. It's a mouthful, and we really do aspire to do all three. At its heart, we talk about trying to sort of hold the foundation accountable for doing what we say we're going to do and for learning really hand in hand with our partners in the field along the way, and as best we can, making that learning available to the field. And prior to joining the foundation, I spent most of my career in higher education, working as a researcher and also leading offices of institutional research and effectiveness, and learning lots along the way from colleagues at AAC&U and from resources like the Value Rubric. So very grateful to AAC&U for all that support along the way.
Well, thanks so much for joining us.
And welcome. Today, I thought we'd start out with a question about we've seen lots of changes, of course, happening with COVID and everything. And basically, what we'd like to start with are what are the shifts in your work area in measurement that we've seen as on the basis of this change that we're needing to go through?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's obviously hard to even start to address it without some acknowledgement of the context that we're all in, which of course you both, and I'm sure anyone listening to this is well aware of. But just the level of disruption, obviously unprecedented in many ways, in higher ed, and of course in measurement, and it's something that continues to evolve, right? So it's not something we've got fully understood and baked at this point. And that's playing out at the federal and state and local policy levels, is playing out at the level of institutional responses, and the data we get is it's never fast enough. We had a very significant survey come out in April, and in June it felt just totally out of date, just because of the trajectory of the response. And I think it's important to, and a little humbling to realize how little we know about what things may look like in a year, in 18 months, and some of the potential longer term effects of, again, both the disease, but of course the impacts. Also important to sort of say out loud that just about every indicator that we do have right now suggests that the impacts have been pretty inequitable. And in many cases are amplifying inequities that existed in higher ed long before COVID. And I think this is true in particular for Black, Indigenous, Latinx students and institutions that are disproportionately enrolling them. Our immediate response, as we're thinking sort of as a measurement team of sort of how do we meet this moment, has been twofold, and it's two pieces that can be in tension with one another. So one is trying to look across all of the places we're doing measurement and research work and the methods that we're using, and just trying to take a magnifying glass to them and think, okay, what are the pieces right now that actually we may need to accelerate to pick up the pace? We need more of this in this moment. What are the things that we've got to continue one way or another, but we've got to change course pretty significantly? And are there some pieces, spoiler alert, yes, where we need to stop or we need to pause, if for no other reason than because of the huge capacity constraints that institutions and students and organizations are under right now. And as we think about things that we're trying to actually stop or significantly postpone, you know, there start thinking about things like high intensity qualitative data collection. I mean, just case studies, focus groups, these take a lot of people's time, and people's time have a lot of draws on them right now. And so we've tried to be very thoughtful about where we're doing that. New quantitative data collection. So leaning as much as we can, however imperfect things like iPads or some of the NCES surveys are, how much can we lean on data collections that already exist, right?
Well, it's really good to hear about the work that you're doing, and obviously you're engaging in best practices. And certainly right now, the issues are so complex, and it's so many challenges presented to institutions. And as you said, I work for the City University of New York, and we serve a lot of students who have these difficulties accessing the technology and just having what they need in order to continue with their education. And I think that it's right what you're saying, and we're hearing it from throughout the nation, that these inequities are now more pronounced. We're really seeing it come to the surface more than ever. So pivoting a little, what advice do you have to your colleagues that are working at post-secondary institutions, engaging in measurement and assessment, measurement, research, and assessment?
Sure. And I think there are maybe some parallels here for sure. And you're speaking to my heart again. That's my career background is in offices of institutional research, often very lean ones, with just a handful of folks trying to do as much good for as many without a lot of resources at the table. And of course know from that institutional context varies widely, and it sure is the case right now. And I know we've got colleagues who are doing this work remotely. We've got colleagues who are doing this work on site because students are remote or students are on site. We have folks operating in very different data context, right? So some states have got longitudinal data systems. They actually have a pretty good sense of where the students are, at least if they're in a state or a neighboring state. Others where you're really leaning on the institution's data if they're going to be able to learn anything about what's happening to their students. And so we want to recognize that for sure. But I think as I mentioned at the top, this idea of sort of desk research. I think this is a moment where it's so helpful for all of us to be aware of what is coming out nationally and regionally, and just building that sort of base knowledge. We don't feel like we have to recreate the wheel, right? We don't need to put out a fully original survey on the experience of students in digital learning when there's actually a fair amount of that coming out now. In March, April of this year, it was pretty quiet, and I'll admit I was a little bit nervous about the degree to which for example, the Federal Department of Education was going to be able to pivot to capture some of these things. We've actually been pretty impressed with the way that the census has added some questions specific to COVID impacts for post-secondary students. NIPSAS through NCES has added some questions kind of relevant to the moment. So I think there are resources that we can draw on. One, I'm always beating the drum about, we're a big fan of, and I was, when working in IR offices, is the National Student Clearinghouse. So of course, we're all familiar with this as the place to go to submit and request transcript data. But of course, it can be an incredible tool for understanding where your students have gone, right? I think like this is and they've got some pretty great national level research that's out or is coming out that is looking at some of those swirl trends that are happening right now. I mean, it's a very interesting moment, for example, for transfer, seeing students move who maybe are attending a school a couple of time zones away and are having trouble making that transition to maybe attend a community college for a while, and just getting a sense, are students leaving the system versus are they moving to a different part of the system? I mean, these are all great resources. And I mentioned I think anything right now that captures that student voice and trying to stay close to that student experience, especially if we're not able to be around the students right now to just hear from their voices what's happening. But probably as you move then to, okay, what are you doing yourself? What are you doing for your institution? Some sort of original research. I think the name of the game is focus, right? And again, maybe some parallels to some of the things I shared in our experience. But the first question I think of, I just mentioned it sort of at the national level, but at that institutional level, this question of who is leaving and not coming back, I think is just critical for this moment. And it is a huge risk, I think, for any researcher in the post-secondary space to focus on sort of currently enrolled students and to not sort of do the digging of, okay, what are the characteristics of students who have left? And how is this moment sort of a divergence from previous trends in that area? Because there is a great risk, I think, of, and I'll say, one of my greatest fears is that there's a cohort of students who are going to feel the impact of this in some way or another for years. So maybe they're leaving and they're not coming back. Some may come back, but they may not get the transition support that they need. I mean, you think about students who were seniors in high school this past year and maybe missed out on a semester's worth of math placement, then you're out for another year. I mean, that it's not exactly like riding a bike, right? And so, some institutions have sort of developmental education programs, but not to support a full incoming cohort of students. And so to what degree are institutions readying themselves to seek out these students and then transition them back in?
This has been very interesting. I think that it's really exciting, the notions that, of course, we're dealing with the equity issues, we're dealing with the COVID issues, and the difficulty and the new ways of thinking about data collection. And I'm very, very excited that one of the key answers seems to be a lot of some secondary analyses of data sets that are large, that are out there, that we've been using for other purposes, with some careful refocusing upon what do we want to know and what can we get out of that data. So it's good to hear that these kinds of studies are being planned and being worked on. And I think nothing but the best to you as you go down this road of thinking about refocusing and using all the data available, which we often don't, to answer these important questions.
Right. Yeah, and it's shared work for sure, and we're incredibly grateful to I think in particular to all the organizations in the field that are really leading the way on this. So many of the national organizations. UNCF, ASCU, APLU, Excellencia in Education, AHAC. I mean, the list goes on and on. I think our creditors are being more thoughtful about this in this moment. Of course, AAC and you. But this is this is a field level moment, and if we're going to work together on something, I mean, now's the time.
Thank you so much for your expertise and sharing your contributions with us. We've appreciated having you talk to us about these important issues today. So thanks again. Till next time.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.